Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, and I'll be your host for the program. We'll get into today's interview in just a moment, but first I want to remind everyone that our podcast is sponsored by MD Coaches, a company dedicated to empowering physicians to realize a greater potential and to achieve a greater level of satisfaction in their chosen fields. You can find MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. Well, my guest today is Dr. Tim Raderstorf, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at the Ohio State University College of Nursing and the head of academic entrepreneurship at the Erdo Institute. After initially making plans to attend medical school, Tim used his BS degree in humanistic medicine from the Ohio State University to pursue a Master of Science degree in nursing at Xavier University in Cincinnati. Later on, he would return to Columbus to complete a doctorate of nursing practice as a nurse executive at Ohio State. In addition to his position as Chief Innovation Officer, he holds a faculty appointment as Assistant Professor of Clinical Practice in the College of Nursing at The Ohio State University. He has been a TED Talk speaker, and he is the author of a new book, which we'll be talking about. So now let's hear that conversation. So I'm talking today with Dr. Tim Raderstorf, who is on the faculty in the College of Nursing at The Ohio State University. A really interesting story and a particularly unique story within the nursing profession, I think. So first things first, I just want to say welcome to Prescription for Success, Tim, and thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Randy, the pleasure is mine. I'm very excited to chat with you today and share some time with your audience. In the times we're in right now, this interprofessional collaboration and learning more from each other can only make our lives and our work stronger. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're so right. And I will mention, we don't know precisely when this episode will be released, but we are very much in the teeth of the COVID-19 pandemic at this point. And again, I think this is a great opportunity to underscore the importance of what you have done in terms of being an innovator. But I want to begin at the beginning, as we always do, Tim. It's a little bit unusual still in this day and time for men to go into the profession of nursing, and I'm wondering how that interest developed with you and how you made the decision to go to nursing school.
That's a great question. So my path has been incredibly circuitous, and I started out in a college prep school in high school, and I excelled in STEM. In math and in our sciences. So I was encouraged to go and to be a physician. So I went to Ohio State, and the three majors that they had at Ohio State at that time for pre-med were biology, chemistry, or human nutrition. And none of those seemed that interesting to me, which should have been red flag number one to me that hopping into a career as a physician wasn't going to be the right path for me. But I decided at Ohio State, you could actually create your own degree. So I decided to create a degree that's called humanistic medicine. And it was
this was your invention.
This is my invention. Yeah.
I saw that on your CV and I thought, geez, it's something I've never heard of. And now I know why.
Yeah. So you can actually still take this. It's an approved major at Ohio State, but I believe to this date, I'm still the only one who's taken it. Wow. But it combined all of the pre-med courses. that were necessary. And instead of, taking high level biology or chemistry, I was taking sociology, psychology, geriatric care, just a lot of really things that I thought would be interesting, because though I thought I wanted to be a physician, I was pretty sure I wanted to be in primary care, and particularly maybe even pediatrics. So I really wanted to focus on that human element of healthcare. And eventually it became pretty evident to me that being a physician just wasn't aligning with my life goals as well. And not that, that it's a great pathway and a great passage for many people. It just wasn't lining up for me.
And Tim, if you don't mind, and I do hate to interrupt you, and I want you to go on with the story, but I'm very interested to know what was your perception, if you can remember, at that time of what it would be like to be a physician and why it did not appeal to you.
Yeah. So I was incredibly fortunate. My godfather, Charles Kuntz IV, was a world-renowned neurosurgeon down in Cincinnati at the Mayfield Clinic. And he allowed me the opportunity to be his research assistant for 2 summers between my freshman, sophomore, and junior years. So I got to work in his lab. I did cadaveric research on tethered spinal cord syndrome, and he was developing a novel approach to a novel surgical approach to mend tethered cord syndrome. So the second year, I got to live with him, and I was in the house when he was waking up at 5 and in the house when he was coming home at 10 and 11 at night. I mean, the man was incredibly intense with his work. And admittedly, I think he felt an obligation because he was incredibly gifted. And he would operate on patients that no one else would operate on and change lives for people who were helpless. So I think there was a strong burden on him. And one day we were in the basement weightlifting, and he said to me, are you sure you really want this? And being 21 and thinking that I'm the smartest kid in the world, I said, absolutely. I said, and I don't know if I've ever told anyone in our family this before. He said, if I could go back, I think I'd be a high school biology teacher.
Wow.
And this is a man at the prime of his career, but just had some recognition that I think his life wasn't looking like he expected it to at this time.
That's a great story.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and how fortunate for you that you had access to that kind of wisdom and were willing to pay heed to it.
Yeah, incredibly blessed, but incredibly naive and stupid as well, because I kept going down that path. I didn't stop right then, Randy. So I went forward with finishing the degree, taking MCATs, not scoring that well, and realizing that maybe I needed to start recognizing the signs around me. So I did the proverbial 1990s, early 2000s thing, and I moved back into my parents' basement. And I taught special education at the local high school as a paraprofessional there, because I thought I wanted to work with kids. And so I spent a year in a room with 6 lovely children who experience autism from the moderate to severe range on the spectrum. And very quickly realized that wasn't going to be a long-term career for me. And was fortunate that in between this time, I had been volunteering at a summer camp in Nashford, Connecticut called the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp. And that may resonate with some of your listeners because it was started by Paul Newman. And
how about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So Paul Newman, another Ohio boy, in the 80s, after he had won some national championships with being a race car driver and been nominated for a few Oscars, someone said to him, Paul, what do you want your legacy to be? Do you want to be an actor or a race car driver? And he thought, I don't know if those are the 2 things I want to be my legacy. So that's where the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp and Newman's Own, the brand of started as salad dressing and is now, almost everything, came from, was him wanting to be a legacy as a philanthropist and somebody who changes the world. So I was incredibly fortunate in 2006 to start volunteering there. My brother is a musical director, and he'd been volunteering at the Hole in the Wagon camp, helping run their annual gala. When Mr. Newman was alive, they would take this beautiful but very small theater on this camp, and to call it a camp is pretty inaccurate. It's more like a high class or world class healthcare facility with a world class theater and everything else kind of built in the middle of the woods and meant to feel like a camp. But when Mr. Newman was alive, they do one fundraiser each year. They take a Broadway musical and they would cast him in the female lead, and then they'd bring in a Bernadette Peters or someone else. And, instead of being guys and dolls, it'd be dolls and guys. And so my brother had been volunteering with them. And while I was going through this life change of recognizing that being a physician wasn't going to be my path, my brother said, "Hey, why don't, this is healthcare related. Why don't you come out and just spend a week with me at summer camp? And we'll volunteer during one of their sickle cell sessions, and you'll see what it's like to be here." And, even the stepping foot onto that place, it holds, I could get goosebumps just talking about the whole walk-in camp for multiple reasons. But, it helped me find my career. I met a lifeguard there who now is the mother of my 3 children. And, it connected my brother and I in a variety of different ways. But spending that time there and seeing they had 1 physician full-time on staff and then 7 nurses. So seeing what that healthcare team was able to do for these kids coming in, I knew that was the capacity that I wanted to engage. And it was through the lens of the nurses that I was seeing there.
That is really a great story.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was very fortunate to have a college roommate whose mother worked at a college of nursing in Cincinnati. And I called her up to ask her about it. And I'm not going to name her so her employer doesn't get upset with her. But she said, "Tim, you already have a bachelor's degree. Don't do an accelerated program here. Go to Xavier University in Cincinnati and do their accelerated master's. It's almost the same timeline. You're going to give up 2 summers other than what you'd have to do for us. And when you're done, you'll be prepared for almost any role in nursing." So that's very interesting, and I want to make sure I got this right. At the time that you started the work on your master's in nursing degree, you weren't even you didn't even have the academic requirements to sit for the nursing board. You couldn't become Correct.
an RN at that point.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
So there are a few programs around that do these accelerated masters over 5 to 6 semesters. If you already have a bachelor's degree, and then they have about a year's worth of prereqs that you need as well. That depending on your bachelor's degree, if you did humanistic medicine and we're taking pre-med courses, then you've taken most of them. But I had to spend a year preparing, taking anatomy and physiology and some of the things that are built into the med school curriculum versus pre-med.
And so I'm interested to know some more about this master's in nursing. Was there any? What was the clinical experience? Was there any bedside nursing? What was it like when you were working on a master's in nursing when you weren't a nurse?
Absolutely. So it's basically combining your bachelor's and master's programs together. So it was combining the bachelor's, I would say, the bachelor's of nursing science courses, and then bringing in additional leadership courses for the master's degree. So, you started with pharmacology, then you took an advanced pharmacology course and things along those lines. But yeah, over 1,000 clinical hours. During the 5-6 semesters that we were there, we were in the hospital within, I think, 3 weeks of starting the program. So incredibly intense program. The most intense program I've taken with, the 3 degrees that I've received. They asked a lot.
And just one other interruption. I'm interested. Were you the only person in your class who was not yet an RN, or were there other people like you who had no
program.
prior?
Yeah, the entire program were people like me who had no prior nursing experience, but had bachelor's degrees in science.
That's so fascinating. I would have never guessed.
Yeah. So it's an exceptional way for people, and I imagine some of your listeners, if they're non-physicians, maybe in this boat right now of a lack of satisfaction with their career. And, nursing's an incredible profession for a variety of reasons. The ability to change pathways. I know in your career, you were very fortunate to kind of switch specialties a little bit or have new opportunities.
Absolutely,
throughout. But I don't find that to be typical of the physician experience. I think you're locked in a little bit more as a physician than you would be as an RN. Mm-hmm. So, for people who are, maybe mid-career or thinking about a pivot, this type of program is exceptional because it allows you to really draw on your past experience as a non-healthcare provider and leverage that to make you an even better clinician. So, about 29 people, I think, graduated in that program. They capped it at 30, and we had, I think, one student drop out due to the intensity of it. But all in all, I mean, a wonderful experience.
And so over the next 9 years, what were you doing as you prepared yourself for your doctorate?
Yeah, I kind of jumped around. Again, my career has been pretty circuitous leading into nursing and continues to do that after the fact. So when I graduated, I was in Cincinnati. My wife, though she's from Nebraska, had randomly found a position in Columbus. And so we were deciding between living in Cincinnati or living in Columbus, and opted to come up here, and fortunately landed at Nationwide Children's Hospital as a bedside position, a bedside RN. And that I started that position on my birthday in August of 2010. And by July of 2011, I was being asked to apply for a management position to run our 5 outpatient hem-onc clinics. So in September, 13 months after starting my role at the bedside, I transitioned into management. And I haven't been providing direct patient care since 2011. But the beautiful thing that really catapulted my career at Randy was that at the time that I was taking on this role, Nationwide Children's had just built a 12-story hospital on the property, and we were going to be consolidating our 5 clinics into 4. We were moving from 3 buildings into 2 floors that were on top of each other. And we had to completely redesign our patient flow. So it was one of those opportunities where I got to come in and learn how to lead and learn what I was doing that really wasn't effective as a leader, and has been a great learning opportunity for me to continually draw back upon about how to lead others and implement and run innovation within systems.
Yeah, I bet it did. So
I had 50 direct reports. Some of them had been nurses longer than I'd been on the planet. So you can imagine that I was, and I was the only male in that group as well, from the nursing and administration side. So very different and challenging environment. And after we transitioned with that move, Ohio State was doing the same thing. They were building a new tower, and their emergency department asked me to come over. And at that time, we had new leadership at our health system, and I wasn't necessarily sure where I was going to fit in the future, and thought, if I'm going to make the transition and move away from pediatric hematology oncology, this is probably a good time because I'll be starting a family soon, and I don't know how hard this job's going to get when I have kids. So I made the transition from management of people and moved into quality management in the emergency department at Ohio State. And then that's really where my innovation career took off. Because as I was interviewing for that job, I came up with an idea for a software platform. And, we were moving in this new hospital, or the team was that I hadn't joined yet was moving in the new hospital. And I had just experienced that. So I said to the hiring director, I'm certain that you're not getting all the resources you need, and you've probably already identified a ton of flaws with your plans with your renderings or with the build out that are going to negatively impact your care. So, what are some of those things that are going on that you don't have any control over right now in your system that we need to be prepared for and be ready to address in the future? He said, well, Tim, we're going to open up one of the world's largest emergency departments. We're doubling our capacity. We're going to have over 100 beds. So we're hoping that that's going to reduce our waiting room time and our wait time, which is the number one complaint of all emergency departments. By the way, opening up more emergency department beds is not the problem. It's a little bit further downstream. But so if any of you are expanding your ED, just don't expect that to decrease wait times that much. You're not the problem. It's the system. Then the next two complaints in an emergency department are, can you guess them, Randy?
I probably could, but rather than take a chance on sounding stupid, I'm going to let you tell us.
Yeah, it's all good. It's noise and privacy, right?
I'm not at all surprised. Interestingly, as a clinician, that wouldn't have been what I would have guessed, and I think that's the problem. I think the people that are there doing their best to deliver the care are not always aware of where their stress is coming from.
Right.
But that's it. But that's incredibly insightful on your part, and certainly sort of explains why you do what you do and why I do what I do. But go ahead, finish the story.
No. So he said, we're going to have this incredibly large department, but we're not putting any doors on our rooms. So we're hoping that we're going to address number one with wait times, but we know that 2 and 3 are not going to be addressed because we're not going to be able to provide privacy, and it's going to be a loud. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a loud environment, and it's $450K to outfit the building with these rooms with doors. So I said, you've already invited me back for my next interview, and when I come back, I'll have a solution for you. And granted, this was 2011, so for those of you who are technologists, please bear with me of how simple this idea was. But essentially, I came back to him and said, let's go pitch to the C-suite that we're going to develop a platform that will help with team-based care and queuing of what tasks need to be completed and what patient care needs to occur. So that if a patient comes in and there's a ACA metric that's tied to this, and we need to get the door to EKG time under 10 minutes, we're going to light the door up with a LED strand red until that EKG is marked complete, so that people know that there's a cardiac event in there, and we're going to go in and address that, and that'll help us with our pay for performance metrics, and we'll also do the care that we know is evidence-based and is going to impact outcomes. So we had a variety of different colors that led to different schemes. But we quickly pivot on this and realized, well, glass is a projectable surface. What if we put a projector outside, and instead of using colors, we could put images and time frames on the door? So that was the first idea that we landed with. And within about 2 months or 3 months of me starting my new role, I found myself in front of the C-suite pitching this opportunity to them. And they said, wow, Tim, this is a great idea. Obviously, it was conceptual at the time. I was still trying to find a programmer because there's some IP constraints based on the system that I was working in. But they said, we want you to pursue this, but for now, we're gonna fund you for the doors. So they wrote the check. We got the doors in the rooms after that, and that was this kind of catalyst of them saying, as you start developing your prototype here, we want you to go talk to other people. And the first person you need to go talk to is the dean at the College of Nursing. She's an entrepreneur. She's incredibly passionate about healthcare, and we think you should go meet with her and pitch this idea. So, as we talk about your prescription for success in the future, one of the key things that I'll talk about is never underestimating the importance of a conversation or the power of a pitch, because this one pitch changed my life forever. I walked into the dean's office and had the chief nurse officer from the system there with me, and my colleague who's the director who hired me, and we did the pitch. And she looked at me and said, "Tim, this is wonderful. You have my full support. I'll write you a letter of support right now. But I'm really interested. I'm new to the College of Nursing, and we have a lot of adjunct faculty. Are you faculty at the College of Nursing?" And I said, "Baron, I don't understand your question. I work at the Med Center." And she said, "Well, I know, but has anyone asked you to be faculty here?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, you have your master's degree, right?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, congratulations. You're now faculty at the College of Nursing."
Whoa.
And I was like, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, we are, we'll send you an offer letter here soon, and we're going to figure out how to get you to teach. But I'm always looking for people with a gleam in their eye and a fire in their belly. And I see that in you, and would love to figure out how we can keep collaborating together."
Sounds like you made an impression, my friend.
Yes. And that's where my world kind of flips upside down, Randy.
So you got this faculty appointment, and it was, was that the point where you began to think about, or subsequently began to think about, going to work on your doctorate, or did that come later? What's the story there?
So immediately she started mentoring me towards thinking about a PhD or a DNP after I accepted the faculty position. So, but admittedly, I was thinking, okay, I really like my teammates in the emergency department. I can teach one class at night. I didn't have kids or anything at the time, so teaching 1 or 2 classes at night, making a little extra cash doing that, just felt like a nice side hustle. So that's kind of what I thought. And I'd continue with my trajectory at the Med Center. I'd make my way up to director and have a great team and maybe, explore other opportunities from there. But that the following year, she reached out and said, we'd been in contact frequently about my platform. I also was working with her. I wanted to develop a workshop for clinicians to teach them more about the entrepreneurial mindset and how that can make you a better clinician, or perhaps, it's time for you to take the entrepreneurial leap. So we'd been having discussions, and then a director level position opened up at the College of Nursing over their continuing education department. So she said, "Hey, would you be willing to come over here and work part-time and run our continuing education department? And that way you can stay in the Med Center." And at that point, I just decided I wasn't that interested in doing anything part-time, that I wanted to dive in. So I said, if I can be full-time faculty and direct the emergency or the continuing education department, then I'll make the leap. So she agreed to that, and that made my transition away from the health system and into academia full-time. So it just keeps snowballing from there.
So let's take just a short break for a minute or two. I want to take a moment to talk to you about a new sponsor that we have here on Prescription for Success. Physician Outlook is a new magazine platform built for physicians and by physicians, and it's designed to showcase unique physician talents. Sometimes it might be clinical talents, but mostly it's about the intersection between clinical and non-clinical talents, whether it be writing or painting or cooking, or maybe even making a political statement in front of a state and local governing body, or even at the nation's capital, and dozens of other things. It's available online and in print. It's visually stunning on all of its platforms. I promise it's really unique in terms of physician lifestyle magazines. I think you'll really enjoy it. We think it's just the thing to fill your prescription for success. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook magazine amplifies the voice of any doctor who has something to say, and also uniquely engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get $20 off an annual subscription fee by visiting rxforsuccesspodcast.com/physician outlook. And now let's get back to today's interview. So you did continue your education. You got your doctorate in nursing practice. Now you're a full-time faculty member and clearly have caught the attention of a lot of people. And then I don't want to fast forward too much. You can fill in as many blanks as you like, but now you find yourself as the Chief Innovation Officer at the College of Nursing at The Ohio State University. You want to give us the capsulized story of how that came about? And by the way, I'm going to have to admit it. I got a feeling I'm not the only one. I had never heard the expression Chief Innovation Officer until I saw your TED Talk.
Oh,
so I bet there are some other people around, and we would love to hear you. We'd love to hear what that means and how you got there.
Absolutely. This is actually my second role as a Chief Innovation Officer. My first was as employee number one with a mindfulness-based startup that I was doing kind of at the same time I was transitioning into full-time faculty. But definitely a much more robust role doing this at Ohio State. So I'm actually the first nurse in academia in the world that we're aware of to have this title, but there are many people who have these titles at different industries across not just higher education.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. I think one reason why it might not have popped up on my radar screen, nor the radar screens of healthcare providers in general, is because innovation might have been an undervalued concept in the world of healthcare, although we're supposed to be learning and doing new things all the time. But this whole idea of looking at the model and really shaking it around until things begin to fall out and turning it into something else, that's what innovation is all about. I don't think we've done that very much in healthcare up until probably the early part of the 21st century. I'm interested in your thoughts on that, and if it sort of unfolded for you in that way or not.
Well, that was when I first experienced healthcare. So, historically, I think innovation's actually been around forever in healthcare. It kind of has peaks and valleys based off of necessity. So, you mentioned earlier, we're recording this right in the middle of the COVID crisis. I think that there's going to be an exceptional amount of innovation that occurs due to the necessity that we're facing right now. And I don't mean solely for COVID related products. This innovation, I believe, has a little bit of an addictive substance built within it. And that once you start engaging in these behaviors, you recognize your human potential and your ability to have impact beyond yourself or your system. And people really connect and relate to that. So I think that we are on the precipice of another, it's not going to be an industrial revolution, but some other type of revolution when it comes to rebuilding our opportunities to create the future and not relying on our cell phones or one or two technologies to be the end all and be all for us. But in terms of healthcare, I think nurses in general have been innovating since Florence Nightingale started the profession for us. And not to get too political with things here, but nurses haven't always been at the top end of the food chain in healthcare. So instead of showcasing our work, when we use tongue depressors and tape in a different way and work around a system, we typically hide that because we don't want to get our hands slapped or get in trouble for what we're doing. And I'd imagine that that's the same for some of your physician leaders as well, that people don't feel like they have the permission to be innovative in the workplace. So that from seeing my TED Talk, that's a big passion of mine, but we can table that for a bit later. But I think innovation is about seeing a problem, solving a problem, and then creating new value based off of that. And that's really what we've been focused on through our work, is creating new value. And that doesn't necessarily to us mean that it has to be a new widget or a new gadget. The novelty to the organization can be part of that innovation in itself. Like I said, historically, I'm not so sure when this healthcare revolution has started occurring. I've certainly noticed a lot of it just following the trajectory of my career and when I've jumped into the innovation realm in the last 6-7 years. There's certainly many more clinician-led startups. One of my friends owns a nursing company. They just raised $45 million in their Series B, I believe. And so the world is starting to recognize that the people at the front lines, the physicians, the nurses, the pharmacists, actually are the best people to be in leading these new businesses and leading this new content and idea generation, because they have the best understanding of the problem. So if you can co-design and you can work with the engineers and the individuals who know how things need to be designed and be developed, and you partner that with the expertise of a physician or a nurse or someone who's spent years running into that barrier over and over again and has just decided they're finally, instead of walking around it, are going to knock it down. That's where this beauty and kismet comes into play, that allows clinicians to have a broader impact beyond their typical patient population.
Well, Tim, I think you're absolutely right on top of the problem right there, and that is, I think in the healthcare world, and particularly in the physician world, we have had so many walls that we were rather disinclined to start breaking apart, because we are trained and we live in a world where the mindset is you don't do anything unless you first have the science to support it. And there are certainly lots of situations where it should be that way. But on the other hand, there are other situations where it's not such a good idea. And interestingly, I think a great example of that, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to point out, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Tony Fauci, who is kind of at the forefront of the discussion of COVID-19 at this point, was the person who led the initial clinical research on drug treatment of HIV. And the issue at that time was they had some antiviral drugs. They thought they might work. They had not had an opportunity to do very many animal trials and certainly no human trials. And people were dying. People were dying of AIDS. And Dr. Fauci at that time came under just tremendous criticism from the people who were dying with HIV. And they were saying, we don't really have anything to lose. We'll be your guinea pigs. And it was because of that he was able to break down that barrier and go ahead and test drugs previously untested in humans with respect to safety and effectiveness, because nobody had ever thought about the urgency factor and that there was nothing to lose in that situation. And I guess it was at that point that we began to move away from this notion that you can't do anything unless you have the science to prove it first. And people like you who are very good at thinking through the risks involved and understanding that there are some calculated risks worth taking. And we need more people like you, because it sounds like that's exactly what you've been doing throughout your career as an innovation officer.
Well, thank you. Yeah. One of my other big passions under this topic is commercialization. And I think, at least from the nursing profession, and I know I've had physicians say this to me as well, is that, they don't want to get into bed with big pharma or big distribution, that, it can either taint their research, or they just don't feel like they're profiteering in healthcare. But the conversation that I tried to draw everyone back to is the reason that we all got into healthcare was to improve other people's lives and to have impact. And from my eyes, the only way to have a broad impact in our current healthcare system is through commercialization. Because if you can't sell your idea or your product or your service, hospitals can't buy it. And if hospitals can't buy it, then patients can't get it. So it's a tough realization to come to, and particularly for people who are struggling with the monetary component to it. But remember, you can always do great things with that money for yourself, for your family, or for others after the fact. But if you don't give yourself the pathway and the permission to commercialize your research, you're never going to have the broad impact that other commercial products are going to have on patients, regardless of if you think you can give it away for free and people will use it.
That's a very pertinent way to look at it. So let's get back to your position as Chief Innovation Officer. How long have you been doing that?
I've been in that role for 4 years now.
Yeah.
Just had my 4-year anniversary in it, actually, or 2 weeks ago. So that had been an evolution of being the director of continuing education. From there, I was recognizing other business opportunities that we hadn't been able to capitalize on. So the next promotion from there was executive director of business development and innovation. And then as we continued to find success, the chief innovation officer title came in 2016. So since then, my role, I still teach in our programs. I teach in our Masters of Healthcare Innovation program, which is an interprofessional degree. If you have any listeners who are looking to expand their innovation leadership capacity, I would highly recommend this online program. But I had been working on helping get that launched right around 2016, and when that took off, we were able to focus some of my administration time on a couple of different things. I already mentioned one of them being our healthcare innovation entrepreneurship workshop that we do annually in September each year. We also launched a interprofessional innovation symposium that is actually free and open to the public each spring, where we highlight a business that's been founded by a clinician, and they've partnered with or had an early employee who has a complementary non-clinical skill set, and that we talk about that power of what happens when you bring these individuals together and how that's led to the success of their business. But the main thing that I've done that you saw in my TED Talk is launch what we call the Innovation Studio.
Right.
And the Innovation
Studio. What a great idea.
Thank you. It's our pathway to democratize innovation across campus. Because as I was trying to get my software platform off the ground that I was talking to you about earlier, I kept running into the same hurdles and barriers over and over again. But I also kept getting people who were coming to me asking me for advice on how to navigate the system. And I couldn't tell you, Randy, how many times people said to me, I have this great idea. I just have no idea where to begin. And fortunately, in 2016, we were having conversations with Gary and Connie Sharp, who own a company called Healthcare Logistics, based out of Ohio. It's one of the world's largest privately held healthcare distributors. And they're both or Ohio State alumni. Connie's a nurse. Gary was a geography student. But he, again, had a very twisted career path into starting his healthcare company. And we were talking to them about a donation and their desire to impact the culture of innovation at Ohio State. And I was just candid with them and said, hey, guys, I think the culture of innovation absolutely needs to be improved. But going out and changing culture, I don't think is the right approach. I think we need to change the structure of innovation first. Mm-hmm. And with everyone coming to me saying, I have this great idea, I just don't know where to begin. What if we created the place where you go to begin? What if we were explicit about creating a physical space that was deemed as when you have an idea and don't know where to start, or when you have an idea and you do want to get started, this is the first step that you take. So we created the Innovation Studio, which is a movable makerspace. Think of it as a modern day shop class. So you have all of your woodworking tools at some level, saws and things like that, drills, power tools. But you also have 3D printers, laser cutters, sewing machines, Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, sensors, LEDs.
And you actually put that in a really small space, if I'm not.
Yeah, 16 by 16. So what we love about this space that we've customized over the last 3 years is that we can have it set up in one location on campus, say the hospital, the lobby of our James Cancer Hospital, which is a beautiful facility with 4-story ceilings in the atrium and wall-to-wall glass. We can have it there, tear it down, and be in a new location across campus in about 2 hours up and operational.
That is so
everything
smart.
But the walls are on
so smart.
Everything but the walls are on wheels, and it goes right up the ramp on a 26-foot box truck, and with 6 people, we're in and out each space very quickly. But so that the movability of the Innovation Studio is pretty unique. But what's truly unique about the Innovation Studio is our microfinance model. And this is how we democratize innovation. We do something that no other innovation center or hub is doing in the world.
I have to tell you, this is the most fascinating part of the whole thing for me. So go ahead. Let's hear about it.
Yeah. So we fund every idea. Every team who pitches to us gets at least one round of funding from the Innovation Studio. And you're probably thinking that has to be incredibly expensive. And it's not, because we take a microfinance approach to this. So teams only have to meet 3 simple criteria to pitch to us. But you notice I said team. So If it's an individual, they need to find someone to round out their team in an interprofessional nature. So Randy, you and I could start a team because you're a physician, I'm a nurse. But if I wanted to go out and start it with another nurse, we would need to find somebody else who has a complementary skill set, or somebody who would be impacted by the product, service, or solution that we want to create. So maybe that's a patient, maybe that's a designer, an engineer, whoever that would have a direct impact in our process.
That is so smart, because it means you literally have got somebody else who is already thinking outside the box before you start. It's a great idea.
Right. Or they're thinking in the box, but they're thinking in their box.
Somebody else's box. Right.
Yeah. Right. And it can be outside the box too. But the beauty of it is that, typically how devices are made now is that, a device company goes into an operating room, they hear the team complain about a couple of things, they come back to the team and say, hey, they're complaining about this. Then they design it, and then they bring it back to the team and say, is this better? And they say yes, and then it goes on the market. That's not a good way to do things. And physicians out there, stop giving away your intellectual property to device companies. If they're asking for it, then you say, sure, let's sign a consulting agreement and we'll talk about why I think you need to change this product. Don't give away your IP just because someone's asking for it. And that goes for any clinician or anyone who's listening to this. But by having 2 teams, that's one of our criteria. So it has to be a team of 2 or more individuals with different backgrounds. Your idea has to improve the health and well-being of one person in the world. So it doesn't have to be a surgical device. It doesn't have to be something that's utilized in a hospital. It can be a pothole management system that helps people identify when roads are deteriorating and the likelihood for crashes is going to increase. We basically take the approach that what isn't healthcare, because all the decisions we make end up impacting our health. And then the final thing is that if you're a faculty and staff member, and this ends up being an invention, then you have to follow university protocol and file an invention disclosure and work with our tech commercialization office, which is another added benefit and resource for them. So we make the barriers to entry as limited as possible. And then we give them a micro grant. So first-time teams receive between $250 and $1,500 to get started. And I'm sure many of you are thinking that's not enough money for a startup, and you're absolutely right. But you have to remember, we're doing this at the ideation phase, at the very beginning. So most of these teams don't typically even spend that $250 in the first 8 weeks. They need access to an Arduino or something that may cost $7 to $10. Mm-hmm. A Raspberry Pi costs $100 for a full kit. We're not talking a lot of capital investment. What they need is sweat equity. So I can give an example of that here in a second. But I think that it's really important that you recognize that not only are they getting a grant one time, but because the Innovation Studio is movable, we do what's called our annual tour, and we make 5 tour stops throughout the year. We stay at each location for about 7 to 8 weeks. So when you come to us and picture this the first time, say we're in the hospital, we give you $500 to get started, and we give you one milestone to go out and achieve. Once you achieve that milestone or work towards it and find out that you're not able to achieve it, we encourage you to come back to a subsequent pitch day. So that may be 8 weeks later, or that may be 16 weeks later. But we ask you to come back, showcase how you've been good stewards of the funding and the resources we provided for you, and then ask for that next round of funding.
And all of these events are right there in the Columbus area, are they?
All of them are on Central
campus
in
okay.
Columbus. Yep. Because you have to be an OSU student, faculty, or staff member to pitch to us because of Ohio State law using university resources. There's some caveats to how those get allocated. But so you pitch to us the second time, and you can ask for an undisclosed amount of capital. What we do at that point is say, all right, do you need all of this for the next 8 weeks? Because now that you're back for your second round, we're expecting that you're working on this consistently. And if you come and ask for $3,000, we're going to say, how much of that $3,000 are you going to spend between now and the next pitch day? And if the answer is $800, you're getting $800 from us that day, and you're coming back 8 weeks later and you're asking for the remaining $2,200. And we're going to ask that same question. Are you going to spend all $2,200 between now and the next pitch day? Yep. Okay, let's keep going. But it's kind of a tranche-based VC model without capping it at the end. And it allows people to take one bite out of the chocolate elephant each day. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty amazing what we've seen happen. This thought process that innovation has to be expensive is just not the case. So my favorite story comes from a team that was led by a clinical nurse specialist in our heart hospital. And we're in Ohio in the throes of the opioid epidemic, and we have patients who have addiction issues. So and they look a lot like you and me. We have no idea of telling who these people are. We ask our screening questions, but you're not sure you're always getting the right answer or the truthful answer. So the hospital started putting these. I don't know if you all have seen it in the hospital, but it's a blue and silver metallic tape that goes over every IV bag. So when the pharmacy sends an IV bag down, it has this tape on it. So the nursing staff said, okay, we're going to start putting these on all the IV ports so we can hopefully stop patients from accessing their lines, because not only are patients accessing their lines, but you can imagine that it's not happening in a sterile environment, and they're getting central line and cardiac valve infections. Then they're staying at the hospital for another 21 days. That goes into the hospital, and the record as a nosocomial infection, and the hospital has to eat the extended cost of that stay as well. So patients are getting sick. That's a no-win for anyone. They're not getting the addiction support services they need. That's a no-win for anyone. And the hospital is having a high increased cost caring for this patient population, which doesn't win for anyone as well. So she thought that something needed to be changed. And she said, okay, I'm going to create a tamper evidence seal that can go over every port of the IVs. So it's a tape that you can put over we use the Kuros caps in the hospital. So it goes over the Kuros cap, and then you can tell if someone's attempting to peel away the port or at the tape. And that way, if you see that, you're able to provide them with the addiction support services they need, and you're able to chart in the patient chart that they were attempting to access their lines. So it becomes a win for the patient because we're able to help them, and it becomes a win for the hospital because they're able to not have the additional cost associated with patients accessing their lines. But this woman had this idea. She had literally drawn it on a napkin on a sailboat one day, came to the innovation studio in October of 2017. And by July of 2018, she had an international licensing deal with one of the top distributors of medical grade tape. And in total, we spent $240.20 to get there.
Wow.
And that's because she came to the innovation studio on a regular basis, learned how to develop a rig that would layer multiple tapes together, figured out which tapes would be appropriate for the environment. She learned how to use our laser cutter so that she could do multiple versions of the prototype and take that back to have frontline staff test them to figure out how do we make this easily an easy tearaway so that when nurses needed to access it, they didn't have to fidget with the lines as well. And, came to a pretty great resolution within a short period of time. And I'm happy to say that product is now on the market as of early this month. And, it goes back to that idea that we were talking about earlier that, she wanted to keep these patients safe. And she could try to do that within her system, and she could have developed these at the innovation studio and tried to get approval from the university's product safety pathway. But instead, she decided to commercialize. And now it's not going to be just on her unit or just within her health system, but patients around the world are going to have this tape per evidence seal on their IV lines. And she's going to save lives because of it.
That's such a great story, Tim. And as you were telling us about that, I began to reflect on the numbers of brilliant ideas that I have seen nurses come up with to make bedside care more effective and lighten their workload and do good things for the patients. They do it all the time. They do it day in and day out. And it's fascinating to me how many times a Joint Commission inspector comes around and walks in the room and takes a look and says, hey, you can't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And, for you to have, you and your team to have put together a system where people can take ideas like that and go through the steps that it takes to get them legitimized and approved and get all the stamps and seals that they need is just an incredible service and blessing for everybody. And hats off to you for putting that idea in motion. It's really a wonderful thing for healthcare, and we're very lucky. And I appreciate you sharing the story with us.
Of course, yeah, and that's an exciting thing because it shows that there are what we call in the innovation world positive deviants out there, where they are seeing a problem and they're showcasing that there's a solution to it, and it goes against what the system is asking for. So you don't have to, there are positive deviants in every profession in healthcare, but it also showcases that. One of the other sexy terms in healthcare or in innovation is disruptive. Right. That in order to be a successful innovation, you have to be disruptive. And I'm a big believer that disruption in healthcare, or disruptive innovation in healthcare, is pretty challenging. And the only way that it maybe can occur is if there's a global pandemic. And other than that, it requires an exceptional amount of behavior change in healthcare to be disruptive. And we know that clinicians aren't that interested in exceptional behavior change because there's so much uncertainty within our world. So people who are out there and trying to create like this next crazy thing for healthcare, I'd encourage you to think about some incremental innovation as well. Something like what we were just talking about with the tamper evidence seal. Nothing that's game changing or that probably hasn't been thought of by 50 or 60 people before, but something that when someone has the courage to step up and bring it into fruition themselves, has a dramatic impact on the world.
Well, Tim, you got a great story, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us today. And with that, what I would like to do at this point is just step out of your way, and I'm going to give the floor to you while you share with us your personal prescription for success.
Thanks, Randy. So when I look back, this is a little bit easier to do retrospectively, but a lot of these things were relatively challenging while in the throes of them. But the first one that isn't that challenging or something that I felt comfortable with comes from one of my mentors who talks about dangling your feet in the river of opportunity. So that's my first prescription for you is dangle your feet in the river of opportunity. And what I mean by that is allow yourself to be exposed to anything. If you think back on my conversation so far today, by opening myself up to new roles at Children's Hospital that led to a new opportunity at Ohio State, which then led to the Chief Innovation Officer role, starting up companies, writing a book on healthcare innovation. And all of those things occurred because of a willingness to try new things and not having an immense fear of failure. But the other thing that comes with that is that failure occurs quite a bit. So the next prescription I would give you is practice patience and appreciate the character building that comes from your failure. All of these things, all of the accomplishments that I've had, never in my mind happened as quickly as I wanted them to. And I know talking to a bunch of physicians and nurses and clinicians, there's a lot of type A go-getters out there. And it's hard to not get to your goals as quickly as you want them to. But know that as you're working towards them, you're building character, you're building your leadership skills. And those are things that are going to set you up for even greater success if you can practice that patience, be kind to yourself, and appreciate the character builder that's occurring at the time. The other thing that comes into with that failure is know that growth and comfort cannot coexist. I'll say that again. Growth and comfort cannot coexist. So if you find yourself in a point where you are comfortable, know that means that you may not be growing that much, and that's okay. If you're happy with where you're at this point, embrace the comfort. But also on the converse of that, if you're finding yourself incredibly uncomfortable, that may mean that you're in the midst of an incredible growth spurt. So appreciate that as it's occurring and get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that is going to allow you to reach new heights. As we flip the coin here, I always challenge you to think of yourself as a patient and what you can learn from being a patient yourselves. So for me, the biggest lesson I've learned from being a patient myself came from going through male factor infertility. And there was a 3 to 5 year period in my life and my wife's life where we were getting asked the question that no couple experiencing infertility wants to go through or wants to hear. And that's, when are you going to have kids? And that's a really easy question to ask people. And there are a lot of really easy questions to ask people, which kind of led me down this rabbit hole of the importance of not asking easy questions and the importance of asking great questions. So my prescription for you for success here on this point is to actually research how to ask great questions. And let me give you an example. The next time you find yourself asking a couple or thinking about asking a couple who's childless, when are they going to have kids? Or maybe a woman who's getting older in age, asking her when she's going to get married. Don't ask those things. Ask a great question. Something like, hey, what are you really excited about right now? That allows you to create intimacy and doesn't put pressure on that person to perform in a way that they don't want to perform right now. And then my final prescription for you is to recognize that your personal life successes maximize your professional successes. Now, we all don't have perfect personal lives, and there's tons of scars that come from that. But my point in this is that knowing that if you can get your life right at home, whatever that is for you, then the professional successes may not be at the level that you thought or expected them to, but they're going to be all that much more sweeter because there's going to be harmony between your professional life and your personal life. So find a way to create that harmony and maximize the successes in your personal life to feel that optimal success in your professional life.
Well, Tim, that is some really great advice. Quite a lot of profound wisdom for a relatively young man, and I really do so much appreciate you sharing that with us today. And before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to let our audience know, because I know there are going to be some people who want to know more about you and hear more from you. If you can tell us where people can get in touch and follow on email, website. I know you got a relatively new book out, and anything else that you'd like to share with us at this point in terms of ways to find you on other media. What have you got?
Great. Yeah. So this is an area where I've tried to life hack a little bit, Randy. And instead of being spread out across all social media, I found that LinkedIn is actually the optimal tool for me when it comes to social. So if you would love to connect, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. I put a lot of information out there, not just about the work that we're doing, but the work that I see occurring across healthcare innovation in general. So Tim Raderstorf on LinkedIn. I'm the only one out there. It's the perks of having an
what a surprise
name, right? So find me there. I'd love to connect with you. If you're interested in learning more about how we democratize innovation at Ohio State, you can look up my TED Talk. That's on TED.com, or you can find it on YouTube. It's called The Participation Trophy Model for Innovation and Why It Works. And then if you want to really dive into healthcare innovation, as Randy mentioned, you can check out my book on Amazon called Evidence-Based Leadership, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship in Nursing and Healthcare, a practical guide for success. Not to toot my horn too much on this one, but this is unlike any textbook that you've ever read. Chapters are written in the first person. We wrote this in hopes of it reading like a wonderful piece of nonfiction, which we believe that it is. And it's written by experts who have started, $100 million startup healthcare companies, physicians like Adrian Boissy, who's the chief experience officer at the Cleveland Clinic, audiologists, nurse practitioners, just world-class leaders from across all different industries in healthcare that really showcase the power of innovation leadership. And one of the first textbooks, or actually the first healthcare textbook geared towards entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial mindset of the clinician. So would love to have you check that out, leave reviews, throw Rotten Tomatoes at me if you think that's necessary. But that's been a great life experience for me. It was writing that textbook and collaborating with so many wonderful healthcare innovators and entrepreneurs.
I'm not surprised to hear that your textbook is unique, because you are a truly unique individual. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Dr. Tim Raderstorf, thank you for being on Prescription for Success.
Truly my pleasure, Randy. Thanks so much for having me.
And with that, it's time to bring this episode of Prescription for Success to a close. If you enjoy our program, we'd really love to make you part of it. Just visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com and click on the Contact Us button at the top of the home page. Then all you have to do is scroll to the bottom, click on the big red Record button, announce yourself, and then read us your own personal prescription for success. And then we'll play your voice on the air. Don't forget, it's not just for doctors. Anyone involved in healthcare is welcome to participate. We appreciate your support very much. Thanks again so much for listening, and don't forget to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.